Hello everyone, welcome to episode 3 in our series of video chats that we're running at the moment. And today joining us we have alumna and writer Helen Russell, who's joining us from Denmark actually at the moment. Now Helen studied English literature at the University of Exeter before becoming a journalist and an author. She's written for numerous magazines and newspapers, including The Guardian and The Times, and used to be the editor of Marie Claire Online. And a few years ago, Helen also started writing books, including the international bestseller, A Year of Living Danishly. So welcome, Helen. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having me. Nice to see you.
Now, I'd just like to ask a couple of questions about your career first. So after you left Exeter, after you graduated, how did you get into journalism from there?
Well, I didn't know anyone who was a journalist. No one in my family is a journalist. I didn't have any of the connections. So I worked for a couple of years to earn money and then basically wrote to every journalist who had a byline picture who looked vaguely approachable and said, what should I do? And people were very generous and helpful with their time and said, oh, well, do a postgrad and try and get some work experience. So I basically did that. I worked for 2 years in several jobs to earn enough to do a postgrad, and in all of my holidays and weekends and stuff, I did shifts and I did work experience. And then I did a postgrad, and then after that, I managed to get my first job in journalism. So yeah, it's how it is for unless you have,
so lots of hard work, basically.
Yes, yeah.
Now, 5 years ago, you published your first book, Year of Living Danishly. So how did that come about in terms, the difference between being an author from being a journalist?
Yeah, it was really interesting. So I had always been a staff writer, except for during the fabulous 2008 recession when I was doing a lot of maternity contracts and a lot of freelancing. And then towards the end of 2012, my husband was offered his dream job working for Lego in Denmark.
Oh, wow.
And so it was we'd been struggling, we'd been burnt out for 12 years in London. We were quite tired. We had been trying to start a family for as long as we could remember. And suddenly this other life possibility was dangled in front of us. And we were quite stressed at the time. Denmark had just been voted the happiest country in the world. And we thought, well, if we can't get happier in Denmark, where can we get happier? So after some debate, and it felt like a risky thing to do at the time, we decided to try. We thought we'd give it a year. So it was very much a kind of 12 months project from my mind. I quit my job at Marie Claire and I thought, well, I'll go freelance. And so I again started firing out all the emails and trying to meet with people and trying to get new work and new contacts. And I started writing about my experiences here and how just Danes did things differently to the way we were used to in the UK for the Telegraph and the Guardian. I was working as a Scandinavia correspondent for them. And then that just grew and that got a readership. And then I was asked to write a book about it. So it came from there. And it's, as you say, it's a very different discipline. It's just much bigger. The volume of material trying to deal with is bigger. But by working through chapter by chapter, it came together.
Excellent. And that book focuses on what it is that makes the Danes such a happy country. Now, obviously, you've been living out there for a while. I mean, what tips do they have? What could the rest of us learn to become a little happier?
How can we be Danish?
Yeah.
I think there's a lot to do with the trust here. So 79% of Danes trust most people, which is just sort of mind-blowing for anyone who grew up with stranger danger in the UK, for example. So there is this sense that you trust your neighbour to pay their sky-high Nordic taxes and you will pay yours. You trust the government to spend the money well. You trust your neighbours, so you're not worried they're going to rob you to put food on their table. People are taken care of. And the high taxes play into it as well because you have this welfare state, so people are looked after on the most part, at least that's the theory. Yeah. There's also much more of an emphasis on family, on work-life balance. So leaving work by 4, maybe 4:30 p.m. to pick up your kids, get home, make a home-cooked dinner every night is kind of a non-negotiable. So it's just a very different way of life. And they're very outdoorsy. They'll go out no matter what the weather. It's like your grandma used to say, there's no such thing as bad weather, just the wrong clothes. And people will wear the full-on padded onesies that you maybe dress up babies in. Adults will wear those and just go out even when the weather's terrible. So they have a good balance. They have a good life. So I think that helps a lot.
Excellent. Yeah, we could do with today. It's okay, but we could often do with the onesies over here in the UK.
That is so comfortable. Really recommend.
Now, most of your books are non-fiction books, but a couple of years ago you also wrote a novel on Viking. I mean, how is that different from writing a non-fiction book? And I guess also, do you get your ideas from real life, or do they just kind of come out of nowhere?
Well, so the novel was, I struggled for years to start a family and then had my son. Then I got pregnant with twins, and I am a small person. I am a small, short woman, and I did not cope with carrying twins very well and was on bed rest. So I suddenly had a lot of time. I was in quite a lot of pain. I had bed sores. It was all just, bed rest is not as relaxing as it sounds. So when I couldn't move my body anymore, I just wanted to be able to run and jump and just sort of move and live vicariously. So that's how Gone Viking came about, this idea of this Viking training camp for women to learn to be more Viking. So, and it was a really different discipline, because in everything else I'd done, when I could always turn to experts and turn to interviews and delve deeper into research, and this was all in my head, stuck within four walls. So it was really interesting. But I got to, before I was fully confined, I got to meet with lots of Vikings and spend time with them. And before and afterwards, I learned axe throwing and Viking boat building, and sword forging. So really, it was really interesting. There's still a bit of research you get to do with it, but it was really fun.
That's amazing. I want to do that. And just finally, thinking about your career, a lot of people that watch this will be recent graduates, or they might be students about to graduate. If you've got any tips for anyone who's really keen to get into journalism or publishing.
I'm loath to suggest people work for free, because it's so hard. I came out of university with a lot of debt, and I have only just finished paying it off. I sort of fully appreciate how challenging it is. And I don't know, because I am freelance, so I'm not in a position of being an editor and seeing who gets what. But for me, the experience of actually doing the job was really helpful. So work experience was really helpful. I don't know if it was the right thing to do, but I took the first job I was offered when I left my postgrad, because I really needed the money. I had to pay rent. And I had very lofty ideals, and I thought, well, I'd never work with those sort of places. And actually I did end up writing for a variety of magazines and newspapers. And that was really helpful in the end. It gave me a really good perspective. I met people that I might never have come into contact with otherwise. So I don't know if I have any advice, but what I did was I just had to follow, I had to take risks, but I also had to support myself. And I'm sure many students are in a similar position today, that there is no sort of safety net, and you do just have to make money and pay your rent. So that's what I did.
So take all the opportunities, no matter what, really.
Yeah, I think so.
Cool, thank you. And now just a couple of slightly different questions. We are obviously, you're in lockdown in Denmark, we're in lockdown in the UK. It's a very strange world at the moment. And we have a lot of alumni at home with their children, trying to stay working, trying to stay sane. Now you do this anyway, you balance a freelance career with 3 small children. Have you got any tips for anyone who's sitting at home who's struggling with this?
Coffee helps. To be fair, I normally have some sort of daycare help, so this is if any strange noises, forgive me and them. It's really hard, and I do worry it's going to set mothers especially back, perhaps, because we are trying to do full-time jobs whilst looking after children, and often it is the less highly paid job that will take a back seat. So it by no account is it easy anywhere. I think we are just muddling through. I'm on day 27 as I speak to you today, and we have had highs and lows. The fact that we've made it to this stage with everyone's mental health semi-intact feels like a massive achievement. It's the Danish government is speaking about it in terms of furloughing, and I like that. It's this idea we're not going to try to achieve much during this time. We're just going to keep going and stay sane. And a lot of the teachers are saying, just get your children through this with their mental health intact, never mind about achieving things. So I don't know, my house is really messy. My motto now is sort of clean up enough so that we don't get mice, but other than that, and honestly, the crumbs, you could eat off the crumbs for weeks. And the laundromat, no, I have no good tips. It's really hard. It's really hard. I guess you get to spend more time with your family, which can be educational in many ways, and I'm sure we are all closer, but it's by no means easy.
No, no, definitely not. And final question, one of your books is called The Atlas of Happiness, where you basically take a tour around 30 or different countries in the world, looking at what makes them happy. Have you got any kind of secret insights from that book that we could just leave people with as, you know, a little inspiration?
I can hear the desperation creeping in. It's like, it's anything at all. I think, so the Atlas of Happiness, I think, so I wanted to look at unique cultural concepts that different countries do that keep them afloat, and not necessarily keep them jazz hands happy, but just that people do to stay sane there and keep going. And I think in these times, the Greek concept of meraki is quite helpful. This idea of doing something that's a labor of love with an intensity and a concentration without multitasking. So it could be painting, it could be cooking. I am spending a lot of time cooking, more than I would definitely like right now. But there's this idea of, you know, we know now that multitasking is not good for us. It doesn't work. It doesn't make us efficient. And this idea of we single task and do it with complete care and attention, that can be a really interesting, I'm no good at meditation, but a sort of flow activity. So that can be quite helpful. I think the Icelandics have tataridos, this idea of it will all work out, this motto of pure Viking resilience. And I find that very helpful in these days where sometimes it can feel a little impossible. And the Icelanders also read more than any other nation in the world. There's this amazing statistic that one day, I think they have the most books published per head than anywhere else. And there's a running joke that one day they'll erect a statue in Reykjavik of the only Icelander who never wrote a book. So they think that really the books help kind of shore up this resilience, because you're living other lives, you're developing empathy, you're experiencing things through books. And there's a lot of studies showing that when we read, we stimulate neural pathways. So that's a really helpful thing, and something we can all do right now is to become more resilient via books. Well, the Italians have dolce far niente, the sweetness of doing nothing, which I think sounds lovely. I can't do it right now,
lovely,
but if you can. There's also the Finnish kalsari kanit. Have you come across this?
No, not that one.
This is the idea of drinking at home alone in your underwear with no intention of going, which frankly seems like the perfect time to be doing it right now. What you drink is up to you, but there's that's a cultural thing that the Finns swear by.
Awesome, thank you for that. That's definitely finished on a high note. I like the Icelandic idea. You know, it'll all work out in the end. Definitely.
Yeah, proper Viking.
Awesome. Thank you so much for your time, Helen. I know you're very
to
busy at the moment. Thank you for chatting to us, and I hope everyone's enjoyed watching our little chat today.
Thanks. Bye.